Today is October 21st, 2014. We are interviewing Mr. Arthur Odegard, Jr.
That's true, and I feel great. Maybe that's too early for that answer.
No, that's fine. And we are at the Evangelica Covenant Church in Hinsdale, Illinois. Mr. Odegard was born May 10th, 1926.
That's right.
Okay.
In Chicago.
In Chicago. Leslie Lucas will be the court reporter today.
Very good looking, too. So are you.
Thank you. Okay. My name is Cheryl Walker, and I'll be the interviewer. Mr. Odegard, would you like to tell your history and your story?
Yes, that's the first three paragraphs.
Wonderful. You may start.
Thank you. My name is Arthur E. Odegard. Oh, wait a minute. Can I back up a minute?
You can do whatever you'd like.
Well, I was thinking about this morning, and I said, we're blessed to be free. And freedom is not free. And there's been cost for almost 250 years of sacrificial gift of lives and blood by American citizens. And it's amazing that something that is free isn't free because of the cost of what these lives have done. And from the time of the Revolution till now, it's still going on. And it's, well, I thought of another thing this morning too. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among those rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, can I begin?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. My name is Arthur E. Odegard, Jr. I was born in Chicago and moved to Western Springs, Illinois, and attended and graduated from McClure School, and then attended and graduated from Lyons Township High School in LaGrange on a 3 years fast-track program that was promoted by the Selective Service Board. And it was a 2AS deferment, 2A student. In other words, I didn't have to go right away because, first of all, they were getting, and I get into that, the students' grades and progress are reviewed each semester, and the tentative date of induction was to be August 8th, 1945. But because of the dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, they deferred the induction till January 1st of 1946. In that time, well, I have to go back a little. On Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941, over 3,500 Japanese Zeros and bombers attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, in waves and sank or damaged most of the battleships of our Pacific Fleet. In a sneak attack when most of Hawaii was still asleep on Sunday morning. On December 8th, the next day, an all-school assembly was called to hear Franklin Delano Roosevelt speak on the radio to the attack, and basically it was a call to arms. Within 3 months, almost all the senior boys from our high school were drafted, and within another 3 months, many of the junior boys were drafted. I was a sophomore then. So anyway, another 3 months, I then completed all of my high school requirements in my junior year, which they allowed me to do, and enrolled me at Lyons Township Junior College, which was right upstairs of the high school. In 2 years, I completed 60 hours required of an Associate of Arts degree in pre-engineering, and mostly it consists of intensive math, statistics, and calculus, and pre-engineering mechanical drawing and design. I was then told by the draft board to enroll at the University of Illinois in Champaign, where I had been accepted, subject to a 2-week notice of induction, if required, which meant that they could call me at any time. However, I was able to complete the whole semester and get credit for it before January 8th, 1946. And that's my story up to then.
Okay. Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
Well, you're going to hear a whole other bunch of stuff.
Okay.
So
We'd like to hear it.
you ready?
We are.
Okay. On January 8th, 1946, I reported for induction at the LaGrange Village Hall. That's a town east of Western Springs. And we were sworn in and took the Burlington Railroad, that's the railroad right out here, down to Chicago, and then took the train up to Fort Sheridan, where we were given our clothing, shots, our uniforms, and in 2 or 3 days we were shipped to Fort Lee, Virginia, and assigned to the 42nd Quartermaster Training Company. First Lieutenant Murphy commanding, and I was assigned to Platoon 1. Second Lieutenant Thomas was our platoon commander and interviewed us one by one. I walked forward and saluted, and Lieutenant Thomas said, "Was that the Boy Scout salute?" And embarrassment, I said, "Yes." He said, "You will be squad leader of Squad 1. And then next week, or a week later, we spent a week on the firing range, and the squad leader qualified first, and then helped each of the squad to qualify. Besides being field stripping and reassembling the M1 rifle, which was the basic rifle of World War II, I also earned marksman with the rifle medal, which allowed me to get $5 a month extra. Whoa. Upon completion of basic training, 40 of us were selected and shipped to Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. That is the WAC training place for the whole country. Boy, we were excited, and we took the Adjutant General Department training in IBM machine records. Machine records are predecessor of computers, really. This was a 6-week course, and upon successful completion of the course, our MOS, Military Occupational Specialty, was changed to MOS 500 in the Adjutant General's Department. Before, we were grunts in the Quartermaster Corps. So we were then given a week delay en route to report to Fort Lawton, Washington, in preparation for shipping to Japan. Because we were on a fast track, in fact, as soon as possible, ASAP, we were shipped on a luxury liner, the Grace Line Mariposa, with 953 officers, women, and children, and 40 of us from the Adjutant General's Department. So we were in Japan in 9 days. Coming back from Japan on a Liberty ship, it took us 21 days. We arrived in Yokohama and were taken to Zama Honshu, which was south of Yokohama and Tokyo, and that was the west point of Japan. Most of it had dirt floors, so already we could tell there was a difference. We had a physical, more shots, and orientation, and were sent on one of those fast trains to GHQ in the Far East Command in Tokyo. We were assigned to our earthquake-proof barracks that we wondered about, and the honor guard for GHQ, over 100 men who were over 6 feet tall and had special dress uniforms, including chrome helmets. They called them brass hats. We then learned why they had earthquake-proof barracks. Because we learned that approximately 30 earth tremors a day, since most of Japan is on the Far East fault line. For our MRU office, Machines Record Unit office, was in the Hypothic Bank Annex, which was immediately behind the Daiichi building. Daiichi building is a beautiful building right on the banks of the kind of a river. It isn't a river, but it was a small extent of water, which was exactly across the avenue from the Imperial Palace. So MacArthur, in his 8th floor, could look down on the whole Imperial Palace and its grounds. That's Hirohito's home. There was a religion then that was called Shintoism, very popular in Japan, and it worshipped the emperor and worshipped God in that way. And that was one of the jobs that MacArthur was able to do, was changing that Shintoism in something that was no longer a state religion, and the emperor was no longer its #1 god. And he got Hirohito to agree to that he would be a lesser light, so to speak. But it eliminated a big problem, the one of religion. Being in an occupation force was very exciting. I can't tell you all the things that happened, nor is it legal to. A lot of it was top secret and secret. But at the same time, excuse me, our General Harbison was the Adjutant General in our Hypothic Bank Annex, where our MRU units were kept. It really, I happen to know because I got the bill later, cost $55,000 a month to rent the IBM equipment that we had there, which included 50 key punch machines. Well, wait a minute. I'm going to back up a little. I didn't tell you about the other generals. There were 3 other generals in Daiichi Building. P2, General Harbison, I told you about. The Adjutant General was P1, personnel. P2 was intelligence. P3 was training. And P4 was supply, all part of GHQ. And of course there were myriad generals and colonels and officers in it. Also, I forgot to mention earlier that General MacArthur was a 5-star general, of which there were 5, maybe now 6, which included Eisenhower, Patton, George Marshall, and I think there were 1 or 2 more. Anyway, but only 5 or 6 men in all the history of the United States were made 5-star generals. Also, General MacArthur was awarded the Medal of Honor. That was the 3rd one, for his service to the Japanese in the Philippines. The Philippines is over 1,000 islands, extends over 900 miles, and MacArthur, the whole story was he was head of the Philippine Scouts and then was slowly driven back by the Japanese to Corregidor, and actually then left Corregidor with his wife and son, incidentally. His wife was a young lady, and his son was 9 years old at that time, Arthur MacArthur. And so they ended up at Corregidor, and then they were taken by boat to Australia when he said famous words, "I shall return." And he did return. So that's why they gave him the Medal of Honor. On August 30th, 1945, in his plane, the Bataan, and it was I think it was a DC-3, and his headquarters staff, and he flew 900 miles from Okinawa to Atsugi Airport in Japan. While on the flight, he shared some of his goals for Japan, including the creation of a democracy. And when you think about it, you took a feudal country that was very militaristic and changed it to an infant democracy. Was really quite a job. And it would include such things as suffrage for women. they didn't vote. They were chattel. They were nothing. Think of another story. I get sidetracked, but when we first came to Tokyo, the streetcars were still running. And so that streetcar would go by, and there'd be 5 or 6 of us guys wanted a ride, and we'd see this, and we'd say, wait, this is crazy. The women and children were hanging on the outside of the streetcar, and the men were all sitting down in the streetcar. We said, we'll change that. And so we asked everyone to get off the streetcar, which they did. Then we had all the women and their children sit down in the streetcar, and then we said, Hayaku. Oh, we got on. We hung on the rear end, and we took off and left the men hanging on the outside. That story you won't get told, and that probably I'm going over the line and telling something like that, but that's indicative of the kind of atmosphere that MacArthur instilled. So they got to Asugi Airport, where considering other things besides suffrage for women, a representative government, which they didn't have before, no breaking, and the breaking up of the industry cartel, which was Mitsubishi. I'm probably pronouncing it not quite right. Mitsubishi. Anyway, that was similar to the Krupp cartel in Germany. One company made everything. They made the Jap Zeros. They made the battleships. And they owned it all. And that was part of the problem. So he broke that down, and as a result, such things as Toyota, Nissan, Sony, and Samsung all came into being, and owned by more people and owned by stockholders, and another revolution that was taking place. Anyway, when the officers arrived in Japan at Asugi with MacArthur, he said, men, remove your sidearms, leave them on the plane. And the whole plane load unloaded with no guns. And that was such a revolutionary idea for the Japanese. They couldn't believe that. And it was dangerous doing it because they could have had a sniper out there. Well, one of the first things that he did was in the 46 prefectures, a prefecture, which is similar to a state in the United States, but they're much smaller, but they're very heavily populated. GHQ provided for a team of 7 officers, U.S., 7 civilians, Japanese, 20 enlisted men, and 50 Japanese ordinary citizens. They were called military government teams, and these, one in each prefecture, actually governed the local area. Also, our government and the Army, there were almost 1,300 CIC detachments, which was like a military police outfit for every little small town in each of these islands. And so you can imagine the job of just keeping that thing all going. Also, Japan occupation was a tripartite occupation, which means the United States, Britain, and Russia were the 3 powers that ran the country, with the Russians entering the Pacific War a few days before the Japanese surrender. And MacArthur, General MacArthur, did not like Russians. And I don't think that's any secret. They asked then the next day or a few days, they wanted to be on the battleship Missouri for the signing of the surrender. And General MacArthur said, no. The actual surrender was signed September 2nd, 1945 by General MacArthur, and Shigemitsu was the Japanese foreign minister on the deck of the U.S. battleship Missouri, which is the largest battleship on Earth at that time, was 20 stories high, and its guns could shoot a 55-gallon drum of bomb 7 miles. There were over 260 ships of the Allied powers in Tokyo Bay, including the Missouri, and the battleship Iowa was also there. Each month there was a ceremonial change of power with a brass band of each country sharing the event. So that was quite a thing. Once a month, the Japanese all came out to watch the bands and the marching, the honor guard, and so on. But all power and decisions were made by one man, General Douglas MacArthur. The Russians didn't like him much. You can figure that out. But General MacArthur soon realized the greatest problem the people of Japan, and especially the children of Japan, were starving. And that really contributed to the end of the war. We didn't realize that they were almost starving, the whole country. And, well, we knew the Philippines were, but we were trying to send food there between the Japanese battleships, but it was really bad. And well, I would switch gears a little now and tell you about our 61st and 96th MRU, which was about 200 men, and these 200 men were responsible for all these punch cards, 435,000 of them, one for each individual, from the top man down to the last soldier. Each one was similar to when you ladies were kids, the treasury checks. They had punched holes with a coding in it. Well, into each card was coded the man's name, his dog tag number, his rank, when he entered the service, when he's due for return to home, and what his pay was, and everything in this card. Well, the one we kept track of, one for each man. And it covered the whole Pacific theater, from Hawaii to Okinawa, from the Philippines and Japan, and also including the Air Force, which was part of the Army then. I don't know if you knew that. And all the military police units, and it totaled, well, at the high point it was over 500,000 cards. And it included 8th Army with General Eichelberger, who then was involved in Korea, the 24th and 25th Infantry Divisions, the 11th Airborne Division at Sendai in northern Honshu. The Key Punch Department was the largest department, because every Monday morning, every company, platoon, CIC unit, Air Corps unit, and across the whole Pacific was sending a morning report on a Monday morning. Can you imagine such a flood of paper? And it got there by all different direct ways, by plane, by hand, by mail, by so on. The Keys Department consisted of 2 shifts of 50 men, just punching in the new changes on these punch cards. They entered changes such as new assignment, change in rank, pay or medical condition, limited duty, disability, injury, wound, or death. Then the sorting department sorted, and they sorted night and day, 2 shifts every day, sorting the cards in and out of this file. Just the room for the file was 50 by 100 feet. It was the whole floor of this hypothetical bank. The collating department was pulling old cards from the file to change them and inserting new cards into the file to change them. And the tabulation department, that ran reports for headquarters, divisions, War Department, Air Corps, whatever was needed by that particular individual. I was supervisor of the strength section, whose main responsibility was the monthly reports to Washington. And that's how I got to know my friend better. Excuse me. Am I messing up here? What do you do about all this stuff, side stuff I'm putting in?
That's fine.
When we first arrived, we were running about a week late. We're supposed to have it finished by the end of the month, each month, to send to Washington. And General MacArthur had pressure put on him because the reports were not prompt. I made a suggestion to give the tabulation department, what there were 18 of us in that department. The machine that we worked on was, each one of them was about the size of this table and weighed about a ton. And we had 5 of those lined up running reports. Can you believe it? I made a suggestion to give the tabulation department a 3-day pass to motivate him. Major Richards, who was MRU commander, in other words, in charge of us directly, agreed with the plan. Basically, we were, boy, my voice, can I have a... Your fingers getting tired? Oh boy, I'm almost through. Basically, we work 6 or 7 days a week, 2 shifts a day, for 3 weeks, sometimes 2.5 weeks, a month. And on the last day of November 1946, for the first time in over a year, we completed the report on time. Our success came to General MacArthur's attention, and I was called to his office, and he thanked us and increased my rank to Staff Sergeant, 1 more stripe. On our 3-day pass, we took a weapons carrier, a couple of cases of K rations, and drove up Mount Fujiyama to the 10th station. And that particular time, that was in January, maybe early February. No, it wasn't. It was January. There wasn't much snow on Fujiyama. Usually it's covered on the top with snow all year round. And so we were able then to walk from the 10th station to the top of Fujiyama. It's a very beautiful mountain. It sticks up above the sea, something like 9,000 feet. We then, the second day of our 3-day, went to see the Buddha, the giant Buddha at Kamakura. It was 44 feet tall, built in 1352, and it is impeccably lacquered and kept up so it looks like it's brand new. And that was before Columbus came to America. And then we ended up the third day at the baths at Atami. This is where you bathe in the ocean and they have people help you take a bath. In the meantime, I was often asked to serve as NCO of the day, which is non-commissioner officer of the day, which required all-night sleeping in MacArthur's office at the Daiichi building and with a fold-up cot and a blanket next to the red telephone to the War Department. This was at first I put several, and then I thought it was many. I didn't count exactly how many times I did sleep in his office. And I served in this capacity and appreciated knowing one of the greatest generals in American history. He was always carefully dressed, and yet he was always on, if you understand what I mean by that. He was a little bit of a ham, and I hoped, well, but it was true. He was part actor, and he was a real gentleman, and I never heard him lose his temper. He was a hero to the people of Japan and the Philippines and South Korea. On his desk was a rack containing 13 cob pipes and 1 meerschaum. Meerschaum was the Dutch pipe. Even though it smelled awfully good when he smoked sometime, I never got tempted. And also a brown leather Bible, which, though not a conventional Christian, he, like Abraham Lincoln, had memorized many passages of the Bible and could recite them. He also wrote the new Japanese Constitution, patterned after Thomas Jefferson's American Constitution. And most of that Constitution is still in force today. He set up the Far East war crimes trials, appointing Sir William Webb of Australia as head to persecute 28 war criminals, and approved 10 other judges from 10 other countries to sit under this head. Some of those, I have the list of them, but I don't think you need to know them. But they were all countries in that area, like India, China. Many of them been hurt by the Japanese. I can remember many times when he would come to work or go home for lunch, being General MacArthur, when crowds of Japanese women, men and children would be out on the curb offering respect to their hero. I remember on one occasion him asking me, "Are the troops happy?" And he did that more than once, but how do you answer him? Most of them were belly aching most of the time. And the food or something, KP and I said, in answering him, as well as can be expected, sir. And I didn't know what else to say. When he heard I was to be sent home, he offered me a 4-year civilian's job to be the IBM supervisor of the strength department with a GS-13 rating, including housing and an auto and a cook and a maid, and 3 months' time to go home and prepare to come back and return for 4 years. I immediately called home to Ina, my intended, and asked her if she wanted to be married and come and live in Japan. At the time, she was caring for both of her parents at home. She responded, the marrying was okay, but because of her parents, she couldn't leave home. And I understood, and sadly told General MacArthur, you honor me by the offer of working with you, but my intended has ill parents. He understood and wished me well. Sayonara, Japan. That's the end.
Well, I have a few questions for you. First off, were you on the Missouri when the signing?
I wasn't. It was on September 2nd, 1945. But I went on the Missouri when it was in Bremerton, Washington, and got to see and they have the spot marked on the deck where actually they was signed.
Going back to the trolley and how you let the women sit on the trolley and all you men hung on. How did that go over with the men, the Japanese men?
With some of them, they were very appreciative of honest. They really were. But most of them were, and they were crotchety about it. But it changed a country. And of course, that's only fair. But yeah, we thought we were being kind of renegade by doing it, but we never heard about it.
You talked about the earthquake-proof barracks.
Yes.
What made them earthquake-proof?
They were built of all of concrete with lots of rebar, that steel. They looked like a prison almost, but they were very comfortable. And when the earthquake would hit, they were usually light ones, but I remember they were hanging lamps in the bedroom. We had 4 men to a room, which for Army is very deluxe. But the chains on those lights would swing back and forth, and we knew that we were in the midst of another earthquake. But some of them are very severe, as you know, when there's a tsunami or something like that. But most of them are very minor, and they live with it.
Did you have any severe earthquakes or tsunamis while you were there?
Just minor ones, yes. There was one time when one was supposed to come into Tokyo Bay, and they said there would be an 11-foot rise of water, but it only turned out to be 3.5 feet. Tokyo Bay is like a huge inland lake. It would be similar in size to Lake Michigan, but not as long, you know what I mean? So you could put a whole bunch of ships in there, and that was one of their secret weapons. They had a place to dock they had the bigger amount of battleships and aircraft carriers than America. And that's how they took over Hong Kong and Singapore and Manchuria. And they were there was in the war crime trials, two of the people they went after the most was Hideki Tojo. Tojo was the head man, and he was a militarist they did terrible things to people, and they didn't mind. Well, they killed 100,000 people in Manchuria, and China, they were afraid they were going to be taken over. So, interesting thing, President Truman appointed General MacArthur Supreme Commander, Allied Powers. And President Truman, then after Korea, when, I don't know if you remember that MacArthur was bombing over the Yalu River, which was China, and the Chinese had massed 300,000 people on the North Korean border, and he was bombing, and that's when Truman flew to Guam, and it took him a month of worrying about it, though, and he had to fire MacArthur. And that's when MacArthur say old soldiers don't die, they just go away or something, I forget. Oh boy.
How long were you, did you stay in contact with General MacArthur after you got out of the service?
I did write letters to him a few times, and he had secretaries and so on that would answer. He lived in the last years of his life in New York. I did not personally get to talk to him, but we did communicate. And he had a big, I guess you'd call it the top floor of I think the Waldorf Astoria or something like that in New York.
Do you recall, were you ever in MacArthur's living quarters?
No, his living quarters were at the embassy, and they had guard. Part of the honor guard was there all the time. Plus, the Secret Service was also there. And the same way at the Daiichi building, there was no obvious guarding other than two men at the front on the first floor, but there was an elevator up and so on. And there's a story of when one of the gardeners, in his office, he had these huge pots of chrysanthemums, the big ones. And these gardeners would come up to take the wilted ones away and bring new ones up. And it's the story of the gardener going up the elevator with MacArthur without a Secret Service man or without a guard. But that's the way he was. But no, he lived at the embassy, which was about, I'd guess, 8 miles, 6 miles. And he had a big Cadillac. And he would go home. Well, he'd come early in the morning, usually at 6. And then he'd go home lunchtime at probably about 1. Well, lunchtime would last till about 4 o'clock. I'm sure he took a nap. And then from 4 to 7, he had meetings practically every evening. He had I bet your fingers are getting tired. Oh boy.
Not at all, Mr.
Anyway.
Take your time.
It's fun to share it with.
Do you remember, did you eat in a mess hall?
We did, yes. At the earthquake-proof building, we had a mess hall, and the food was very good, except that we complained about the cardboard eggs. They were powdered eggs, and no matter how you fixed them, they were still they had, a funny flavor. That's another thing what didn't tell you about, and that they had honey buckets. And you know what a honey bucket is? They had carts drawn through the streets, and they collected the waste from people, and they would put that on the ground of the agricultural grow. So we could not eat anything that was grown in Japan. But one thing, fruit. For some reason, we could eat their tangerines or their apples and so on and so forth, but we couldn't eat or drink water because of the honey buckets.
Did you have water flown in? How did you get water to drink?
They had a actual, for us, for the whole GHQ, had a water system that was separate. If you went to a different, like the British or Russian, they had canvas sacks up with water that had been reconditioned and treated with chlorine and so on. And we tried not to drink that water. There was no bottled water like today, You
talked about the one R&R that you got. Did you ever get another? Did you take any other R&Rs?
A few. We went to the Emperor's Park at Nikko, which was beautiful. It was up in the mountains, and they have beautiful hotels up there where the very wealthy Japanese would stay, and so on. And where else? Oh, I did go to Hiroshima. We could not go to Nagasaki because it was still too highly radioactive. But we could, enlisted men could go, or officers, for a day and or two, but a day was enough. And when you think, I heard that 100,000 people were slaughtered by that. I have read that somewhere, but if you had seen Tokyo west of the Meiji Museum and Tokyo University, it was just as flat as this table, like Illinois farmland about 70 years ago. It was just every house. See, they were mostly houses of wood and paper. They had paper, what do you call them, between the, hello, they're peeking at us.
Did you bring any mementos home? Did you have anything that you sent home that you purchased over there?
Yes, I did. Funny you should say. I bought a silk kimono with my wife's name, wife-to-be name on, and one for my mother and one for my sister. And I got them at the Imperial Hotel, and they were very costly, but we have a good exchange rate. I'm trying to remember what it was exactly, but what else did I bring? Oh, I brought home some little Japanese dolls, and then I made a friend of a painter in the Imperial Hotel, and he said, what you need are some wood block prints, and I'll give them to you at a good price, and I won't mount them in frames, so you can roll them up and bring them home with you. And I still have those things, and they're beautiful. I've had some of them framed, and but woodblock prints is where they actually, put one color down and print it, made with a wood block, and then another color, and they build maybe 3 or 4 or 5. They're unusual. I'm glad you reminded me of that. I did one other thing. I went to Tokyo University and took 2 courses, one in statistics and another one in psychology. And I tell you, the fellow that was the psychology professor was a Japanese American, and he would wear outrageous clothing to kind of get his class to wake up, I guess. He'd come with yellow trousers and a purple tie and stuff like that. And I remember that they taught almost, you didn't need complex Japanese to take these courses. And then I took abacus, which is a little thing with beads. And those, I have one at home. And I remember the instructor there, we had a class of about 100. And they were mostly Americans. We were learning this abacus, and it's a numbering system where it goes from 1 to 55 and then you can multiply and you can add and subtract and so on. And this lady, there was an instructress, came by me, and every time I'd be doing it, she said, no, sinistra. I said, sinistra? That's Latin. Sinistra. I was using my left hand. That was bad in Japan. You had to be right-handed. Oh boy, what memories.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us?
I think I've told you everything I can think of, and you're very, very polite to listen to all this.
Well, at this time, I would like to say thank you.
Thank you.
For the time that you've given us, and thank you for allowing me to be the one that interviewed you.
Well, thank you.
And I'd also like to thank you for the time you served our country.
Yeah. Well, it was an honor. It really was. It was an honor. In fact, when I